It was supposed to be just another evening. A quiet night after a long day of filming, nothing more than a chance for the cast to relax, reflect on the work, and enjoy a little downtime. But for Dylan Wang and Shen Yue, that night became something neither of them, nor anyone watching, would ever forget. The day had been exhausting. Scenes had been intense, emotions raw, and the energy on set was thick with focus. Dylan, as always, had carried himself with calm professionalism, his presence commanding yet gentle. Shen Yue, meanwhile, had been immersed in her character, delivering takes with precision and a subtle intensity that drew attention from the crew. By the time the final scene wrapped, both were drained. Most of the cast left immediately after filming, heading back to their hotels or resting in trailers. But Dylan lingered, talking quietly with a few crew members about upcoming scenes. Shen Yue stayed behind as well, tidying up props and checking lines for the next day. The set was emptying, and soon it was just the two of them, the quiet hum of equipment and the soft echoes of footsteps fading into the distance. They both knew it was a rare moment of privacy, and for reasons neither wanted to acknowledge fully, it felt significant. There had always been a subtle tension between them, a quiet connection that fans speculated about but could never quite define. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. It was a soft, persistent undercurrent that existed in every glance, every conversation, every small gesture on and off the camera. Dylan noticed her first. He had been watching her adjust props, her focus intense but graceful. He walked over, careful not to startle her. "Long day," he said quietly. Shen Yue glanced up, a faint smile brushing her lips, the kind of smile that suggested she knew exactly what he meant. "Yes," she replied softly, "but a good one." Neither of them moved to sit, or even relax fully. They stood in the open space between scattered equipment, the lighting dim, the set quiet. The air was heavy with unspoken words, the kind of silence that can be uncomfortable if you ignore it, but oddly comforting if you lean into it. Their hands brushed first by accident. Dylan reached slightly to pick up a fallen script, and Shen Yu's hand grazed his. It was brief, almost imperceptible, yet electric. Neither pulled away immediately. Instead, they held that small, accidental contact for a heartbeat longer than necessary. The subtle warmth, the closeness, the almost imperceptible pressure, it said more than either of them could have spoken in words. Dylan's hand lingered just slightly near hers, and Shen Yu's fingers twitched as if she wanted to hold on, but hesitated. The moment stretched. Their eyes met, and for a second, time seemed to slow. There was no audience, no cameras, no need to perform, only the quiet intimacy of two people who had shared months of on-set chemistry now spilling into something personal. "I didn't expect anyone to stay behind," Dylan finally said, his voice low and measured. Shen Yu's gaze softened. "I wanted to finish some things. And maybe wait until it was quiet," she replied, her tone deliberate but gentle. The conversation lingered, casual on the surface but heavy underneath. They talked about mundane things at first, the schedule, a funny mishap on set earlier, a small detail from a scene, but beneath the words was a layer of meaning that neither could ignore. Every laugh, every glance, every brush of a hand carried weight. Then it happened again. Their hands touched, this time more deliberately. Dylan shifted slightly, closing the space between them, and Shen Yue did not pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally, almost instinctively. It wasn't dramatic. There were no words yet. Only the soft, undeniable connection of two people who had been orbiting each other for months finally acknowledging the closeness they had always felt. They both froze for a second, aware that this was more than a casual touch. It was a statement without words, a gesture of trust, intimacy, and understanding. Dylan's thumb brushed lightly over the back of Shen Yu's hand, and she responded subtly, leaning just a fraction closer. Their breaths slowed in sync, and for a moment, the rest of the world ceased to exist. The crew's chatter, the script scattered across the floor, the distant sounds of the city outside, it all faded. Only they existed, standing in the dimly lit set, hands intertwined, eyes locked, sharing a quiet night that would forever be remembered. Finally, Dylan spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad it's just us right now." Shen Yu's lips curved in a soft smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "Me too," she replied, and neither needed to say more. The sentiment was mutual, unspoken but unmistakable. Minutes passed in silence, but it was the kind of silence that was comfortable, intimate, and full of meaning. They talked occasionally, sharing small confessions, quiet laughter, and fleeting glances that revealed more than words ever could. Every brush of a hand, every gentle nudge, every subtle movement was loaded with unspoken emotion. When the night drew on and the final lights of the set dimmed, they reluctantly released each other's hands. But the connection lingered, invisible yet undeniable. They walked toward the exit side by side, still close enough that their shoulders nearly brushed, still aware of the delicate tension that had grown into something deeper. Fans who later saw photos from that night noticed the subtle cues, the way Dylan's hand rested near hers, the way Shen Yue leaned slightly closer than necessary, the quiet smiles exchanged when no one else was watching. Social media exploded with speculation, commentary, and praise for the authenticity of their bond. It was a night that fans described as magical, intimate, and unforgettable. For Dylan and Shen Yue, it was more than a viral moment. It was a turning point. The quiet night, the subtle hand touches, and the shared smiles became a foundation of trust, understanding, and connection that would shape every interaction thereafter. The next day, on set, the chemistry was palpable. Scenes flowed more naturally. Lines carried unspoken meaning. Every look between them suggested layers of intimacy that only the two of them fully understood. Crew members whispered, "Something changed last night," and it was impossible to deny. Their subtle connection had become real, undeniable, and enduring. That quiet night was a reminder of how the smallest gestures, a hand held, a glance shared, a smile given in privacy, can speak louder than words. Dylan Wang and Shen Yue's moment wasn't dramatic or overt, but it was unforgettable. It was intimate, authentic, and human. It was a night that would forever be remembered by those who witnessed it, and more importantly, by the two who shared it. The story of Dylan and Shen Yue teaches that sometimes the quietest moments hold the most meaning. A simple touch, a soft glance, or a hand held in the right moment can shift everything, creating a memory that lasts far beyond the night it occurs. That night wasn't just a moment on set. It was a memory, a connection, and a subtle confession that would never be forgotten. The night didn't end when they left the set. As they stepped outside, the cool evening air wrapped around them, quiet and still, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. The city lights flickered softly in the distance, and the world around them seemed to slow, giving space for something unspoken yet profoundly present. They walked side by side, neither speaking for a while, but both aware of the electricity in the shared silence. Every step, every subtle glance carried a weight of emotion that had been building for months, long days of filming, moments of laughter, fleeting touches, and quiet looks that no one else had noticed. It all culminated in this night, a night that neither wanted to end. Dylan glanced at Shen Yue from the corner of his eye. She looked peaceful, yet there was a spark there, a hint of vulnerability and trust that made him pause mid-step. He reached for her hand again, not as an accident this time, but deliberately. Their fingers intertwined naturally, and this time, there was no hesitation, no pause, just mutual understanding. Shen Yue allowed herself to relax fully into the moment. Her shoulders eased, her breath steadied, and her eyes met his with quiet acknowledgement. It was a silent exchange, yet it said everything: recognition, trust, and a willingness to explore what had been simmering between them. As they continued walking, their conversation drifted to lighter topics. Dylan teased her about a scene they had filmed earlier in the day, and Shen Yue laughed softly, the sound delicate but genuine. The simplicity of the conversation made the connection even more profound. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It was two people discovering the rhythm of their bond outside the confines of cameras and scripts. Eventually, they arrived at a quiet park near the studio, a place they had often passed during breaks but never stopped to notice. Tonight, the atmosphere felt different. The soft rustling of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, the glow of street lamps, it all created an intimacy that neither had anticipated. They paused on a small bridge, leaning slightly on the railing, watching the reflection of lights ripple across the water. Dylan spoke first, his voice low and careful. "I feel like everything changes after tonight." Shen Yue looked at him, a faint smile curving her lips. Yes, she whispered. I feel it too. They stood there quietly, letting the moment stretch. Neither rushed, neither pressed for words. Sometimes, a glance said more than any conversation ever could. Their hands remained intertwined, fingers sliding gently against each other, holding not just warmth but the promise of something deeper. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. They shared small stories about childhood memories, favorite places, and little things that made them laugh. The night became a mosaic of quiet intimacy, subtle gestures, and understanding. Each story, each laugh, each glance built the foundation for a connection that was stronger than anything either had experienced on set. Eventually, Dylan turned toward her, his expression soft but serious. I've wanted to tell you this for a long time, he began, hesitating only slightly. Shen Yue tilted her head, encouraging him without words. I've always felt something. Something I couldn't put into words, but I think tonight, it feels right to finally acknowledge it. Shen Yu's eyes softened. She squeezed his hand lightly, an unspoken acknowledgement. I felt it too, she admitted. And I've been waiting for the right moment to let it be real. The city around them faded into a blur as the intensity of the night took center stage. Two people, long aware of the subtle current between them, finally allowed themselves to acknowledge it fully. Their hands remained joined, their shoulders close, and their hearts quietly synchronized. As the night drew to an end, they reluctantly prepared to part ways. The drive back to their respective hotels was quiet but comforting, a silent affirmation that what had begun tonight was only the start. Though the world outside remained unaware, the bond between them had solidified in ways no social media post or viral clip could capture. The next day on set, the atmosphere was subtly different. Colleagues noticed a warmth in their interactions, a softness in the glances exchanged, and a quiet confidence in the way they moved together. Scenes that had once required multiple takes now flowed naturally, every reaction and line imbued with authenticity that had been missing before. Even in crowded spaces, Dylan and Shen Yue maintained a gentle closeness. Their gestures were understated, a hand brushing against another, a small nudge, a shared smile, but each carried the weight of the night before. Fans who noticed the subtleties online speculated endlessly, trying to decipher the quiet but undeniable chemistry that now defined them. What started as a simple touch on a quiet set had blossomed into something far deeper: trust, intimacy, and an unspoken promise of connection. Every glance, every gentle hand squeeze, and every laugh shared became a testament to a bond that was no longer just professional but profoundly personal. And so, the night that began quietly, almost unnoticed, became a turning point. A moment where two people finally acknowledged the subtle connection that had always been there. A night to remember, a bond strengthened, and a story that would forever live in the memories of both Dylan Wang and Shen Yue, and the fans who had quietly hoped for